Hey everyone, I'm Mason. I'm a producer and DJ from Amsterdam. Been doing that for 20 something years, and you're here in my little studio dungeon. I release music on all sorts of labels, from Island Records to Skint to Defected, but I also run my own little boutique record label and parties called Animal Language. I'll give you a bit of an overview of the way I work. There are a million ways to roam, and they're all good. But I can only show you how I do stuff, and that's probably. And I have my own ways of doing things. I'll go through the sort of technical setup. I'll go through my way of demoing and sketching, and I'll go in depth in a Logic project to show you what sort of effects and things I'm using on a normal project.
Well, inspiration can come from all sorts of things. I think nowadays a lot of people are very preoccupied with what's trendy at the minute, and I kind of find trends a bit boring. Nothing bad about Resident Advisor or anything, but I just get much more inspired by just digging into old stuff. There's so much great music behind us if you just sort of dig deep. And I think it's also important for every artist to just have your own sound and not too much jump on any bandwagon. And I think that's kind of an issue with DJs sometimes nowadays, because they play and they get to a certain level within their city, let's say, and their friends tell them, okay, you have to release music to be able to, for instance, DJ in the next town. So they go into their sort of behind the laptops with Ableton and just start working. But I think where DJing is a craft, producing music and writing music is like an art form, just like writing a book or making a painting. And you really need to have something to say and something to contribute to what's already out there. So my advice always to sort of young producers is just wait with releasing till you're certain that you have something that's different and original and it's not already out there. I mean, nobody's sort of interested in having somebody that sounds like somebody else or is inspired by something else. You need to find your own sound and your own identity, and I think that's really important. And also don't release too early, because it's gonna you're always going to be followed by all the stuff you released, and if it's, you might look back years later on from, I wasn't ready actually. The way I sketch is, I guess, different from a lot of people. Some people just start on a track and work on it until they finish it, but I see writing music really as sort of in two different steps. One is the actual thinking of ideas and creating ideas, demos, and the other is the more linear path of finishing a track, and that takes, for me at least, quite a few days. I'm a bit of a perfectionist on that, and I see that a bit more as a craft, and I only want to spend that, let's say, 5 days on the track if I'm sure that it's the right idea, because I still think the core of a good track is a good hook or a good theme or a good groove or whatever. So I'd much rather just continue demoing until I have the right track to spend that I think it's worth it spending all those days on finishing it, because otherwise it's a bit of polishing a turd, so to say. So once in a while I schedule these sort of demo weeks and I do like a demo an hour maybe. So at the end of the day you have 8 demos, and there may be like 30-second loops, or sometimes even shorter or sometimes longer. So at the end of the week you have maybe like 50 ideas, and after 2 weeks I have like 100 ideas, and then I look for the sort of best one, let's say, for me, that's worth it finishing, and then all the other 99 just end up on the shelf. I think I was looking at it the other day, and I think there are more than 7,000 over here. It also becomes a bit of an issue with file names, because there are 7,000 tracks. So there was a long time that I was doing cities in the world, and now I think I've named all the cities in the world that I knew of. So now I'm in last few months I'm in objects, kitchen objects at the minute, and then slowly I'll go to the bathroom objects, and you have like demos with toothpaste, cold toothpaste, something like this. So yeah, there are a few thousand here. I can also give you an idea how that sort of works out. I mean, for instance, sometimes I make instrumentals, and then I work with vocalists for them to sort of write on that, or we do it together in the studio. But also sometimes other way around. I get good vocals, and I'm looking for the right instrumental around it. So, for instance, an example here is Danielle Moore, the lead singer of Crazy P. She gave me this vocal. It sounded like this.
fires burn away. Let the dreamers set the sail. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you.
So super rough demo, just a vocal. So I thought, okay, I need to make a track out of it because I like the vocal, but the instrumental sucks. So.
Lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Fires burn away. Let the dreamers set the sail. Let the fires burn away. Let the dreamers have the say. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Let
This one.
away. Let the dreamers have the say. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you.
And it can really be a lot until I have to write one, you know?
The say. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Let the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. I can't get you. I can't get you. I can't get you. Let the dreamers have the say. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Let the fires burn away. Let the dreamers have the say. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. I can't get you. I can't get you. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. I can't. Hold the feeling, I can't get you.
So then I'm like at demo number 15, and for instance, the last one I liked, and then it ends up being this.
Let the fires burn away. Let the dreamers set the sail. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Let the fires burn away. Let the dreamers set the sail. Send the lovers out to play. Hold the feeling, I can't get. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Hold the feeling, I can't get you. Hold the feeling, I can't get you.
So yeah, that's how I kind of work, and it's also I have all these sort of side sort of material that I don't use, and well, there's a lot of it. So it's for me it's also always handy if I work with other vocalists, and I can think, oh, maybe these 10 are a little bit in their vein, or when I'm doing a remix, I straight away can sort of choose from all these sort of older demos. I have all these systems in place where I recycle stuff, and once in a while go back through the last half a year and okay. Mark the ones that have a nice beat or a nice bass or a nice hook, and the majority is super crap, obviously. But once in a while there's something good in there. So welcome in my little studio here. I think the studio is always changing. I'm always sort of selling and buying, and there's been times where this was a bit of a sort of modular museum, and I was really into the modular synths. And at the minute I want to be able to work fast, and I found modular not really the way forward for that. So it's all emptied out and working on a different way. I produce mainly in Logic, in the box, in Logic. I've been with Logic since it was sort of black and white, I think, so I just sort of grew up with it. I think they're all great, all the different DAWs, but I think it's very important to stick to one and become fast at it. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be busy with all the technical stuff, you just want to make music. So the less you have to think about your workflow, the better. But I'll get to that later on. So I'm working in Logic, and I'm always working on 10 different projects at the same time. So I want to be able to, within a day, flick back and forth between project and project and project, without having to readjust the whole technical setup. But saying that, I do miss working on an analog console. That's sort of my background. So I miss the warmth and the sort of depth of of a good analog console. So I wanted to find a sort of middle ground there, and I didn't want to go back to getting a big board in here, even though it would look great on Instagram, obviously. The idea of flicking back and forth project and have to get all the levels right again, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist on levels, you know, and then, you know, if it's just a millimeter up or down, then the whole sort of groove collapses. So I wanted to keep that in Logic. So that was one issue I had, and the other issue I had is I have all these hardware compressors and stuff like that. You know, I have like the stressor, API 2500, mainly very mu, well, a few EQs and other things. And before I was routing that out of Logic and back in Logic with these I/O plugins, and I/O they sort of calculate what the latency is and they compensate it. But at least to me, I felt it's not super tight. When I reopen the project the next day, it's just not as tight as the day before. The latency calculation. Sorry, Apple. Love the project. Apart from that, the program. So I want to get that out of Logic as well. So for me, the solution was, but it's to go to a summing mixer. I chose this Rupert Neve 5059 satellite. So it's basically it's summing 16 channels, and it's I think the summing is sort of much nicer than in the box. So basically, from Logic, 16 buses go into the Neve straight away. So I route all the different sounds to 16 different buses. They go into the Neve, but on Neve I keep all the volumes on 0. So it means that all the volume little micro tuning I'm doing in Logic. So if I flick back and forth project to project, the volumes, I don't need to adjust anything. You know, it's always good. The only thing I do is I've attached all the hardware like EQs and compressors to the Neve with inserts. So I can flick them on in here, in and out here, and it will stay super tight because it's all in the analog domain. And once it gets out of all that, it goes back as a stereo input in Logic, and I can bounce to one click. So that for me was like a solution of those two issues of getting sort of super tight compression and all that, and also having a better quality summing. Yeah, as I said, like in the past I was very much on sort of modern synth tips, so I'm going a bit against the trend because I think everybody's now sort of jumping on it. I have a very synth-wise, a very simple setup. I have a Vermona drum machine that I like because I kind of like to tweak a little bit with it, those sort of weirder drum sounds that you can't really find it easy on samples. I used to Moog Subfetti for bass lines, that sort of thing. Well, I think the Uno 60 was my first synth actually. I have it for 20 years. I don't think it needs much explanation. It's very straightforward. The JX3P, I think it's always been a bit underrated actually of how good it is for pads, and I still really love it. And here's the Nord I used as a main MIDI keyboard. So I wouldn't say it's really a synth haven here, but it's just sort of effective. And you know, at the end of the day, it's about having good ideas, and you can do that on a laptop in your hotel room, or you can have the biggest synth collection, or it's about finding a good hook and finding good ideas. So and there's so much amazing soft synths as well. So sometimes I see sort of younger producers thinking, oh, I can only get my sound better if I have like more analog synths or more, but it's just a different sounds. But it's there's so much great things you can do with a €200 laptop. I think it's really important to be able to work super fast. Also, because for instance, this sketching thing I was telling you about earlier. So I think it's really important to have like a really strong template for you can make them yourselves in Logic or Ableton or whichever DAW you're working on. So you have your own workflow and routing, and you can put your ideas down really fast. So, for instance, the way I've done it, I've made samplers for each section. So, for instance, here I have an EXS sampler with my 127 favorite kicks. So those I update over time. So every time I find better kicks or I make better kicks, and I put them in there. So I straight away have all my sort of kicks there. I have my 127 claps and my 127 heads and my 127 toms, etc. Just to be able to work super fast. And it doesn't mean you have to then at the end stick to it. I mean, if you're really finishing a track, you can still, change stuff into another kick or another snare or whatever. But just to get your ideas down really fast. I also even have like a few MIDI regions that I can just drag and drop with like 18 notes and that sort of thing, just to be able to be faster. Same goes for buses. I've put on all the tracks 9 different buses that are on every track, and they are my sort of standard effects in a template setting. So bus 1 is always for me a long reverb, and then I have a short reverb, and then I have like a super long reverb with a sidechain on it. So if you put like a snap in it, you get like a sort of kind of thing. And my delays and stereo delay, tape delay, blah blah blah. And again, you know, for instance, to choose a reverb is really particular on a certain track. So at the end, I will always sort of replace the reverb, but it's just to be able to get your ideas down really quick. Same goes for routing. To have build your own bus structure with the compressors and things that you like. So you can get your ideas sounding sort of decent pretty quickly. Yeah, I suppose a lot of you guys work with sidechain compression. I always have like a kick channel on top that's going on, but I also automate the volume of it. So for instance, in a breakdown, you don't want stuff to be very pumping, but you want it to calm down a little bit. So then I sort of put slowly the volume down, for instance, of the guide channel for sidechain compression. Then, as I said before, it goes to all these 16 buses and it comes back into Logic for me. It comes in this sort of track here on the bottom, and I use this track also in my arrange to be able to, for instance, automate volume. So in breakdowns, volume can go down a little bit, so it has a bit more effect when a beat drops in, or I can do things like low cut in the total signal. And over there it ends up in my master channel. I change it over time, but a lot of times I use saturation. I've Fab Filter Saturn, I really like that one. I'm using also making stuff a bit more mono in the low end. For club music, I mean in live setting you would have usually like a left and a right wig, and it's all very stereo, but in clubs speakers are sort of scattered throughout the club, and a lot of clubs are actually even set in mono. So it's super important to have your stuff sound really good in mono, so you should always check that. But I also would recommend to make sure that your kick and your bass, or at least the lower part of it, is all in mono. So that's sort of everywhere going to be super tight in the club. And then all the higher frequencies and all that can go super stereo. So my stereo image would always be a bit of a tree, so very mono in the beginning, and then up it goes open. And you have plugins for that. For instance, this BX Control by Brainworks. There you can say, okay, make everything under 120 hertz, let's say mono, and you can also add stereo width. So I use that, and then there are a few compressors that I use a lot, but I'm also using the outboard. So I'm using software compressors a little bit less on master nowadays, because the outboard ones just sound really good. But this Shadow Hill mastering compressor I really like, for instance, by UAD. Then I have my L316 limiter if I master stuff myself. I used to master everything myself. Right now I'm sort of going back and forth with my master engineer and using less limiting myself and letting them do that. And what's really been a very effective plugin, and the most simple plugin of all for me, is Magic AB. And the idea is just to compare your music with other tracks that you are in a little bit similar vein and that you find sounding fat. Because and the way it works, usually if you would stop, let's say, your sequencer and then go to your finer and finding an MP3 that you like and playing it and comparing it and then putting off and then go back into Logic, there are quite a few seconds in between, and your sort of ear memory is only like 2 seconds, I think. And what this Sample Magic AB does is you put 9 tracks in it, and you can just straight away go A, B, A, B, A, B, and you can straight away hear, oh, my track lacks this sort of frequency compared to that track, or my track lacks certain depth, or my track is less stereo. You straight away see the difference in sounds between your track and others. And it's just for reference. I mean, I'm not trying to copy somebody else's sound, but sometimes you just want to see how your track would sort of sound compared to, for instance, other of your tracks or tracks of other people. So I'm using that one a lot. Yeah, and I also advise you guys to use analysis for your levels, obviously, and you can see sort of the frequencies, but it's also important to keep track of your phase. Phase should always be sort of towards the +1, and if it's somewhere in the middle or even below the middle, then you're in trouble, and so take care of that.
Well, that's all we had time for now, but if you want to watch the full video, buy the latest computer music magazine.